So I'm Marcus. I'm currently a policy analyst at the Bank of England. Um, so that can be quite broad. I'm currently mainly working in the capital quality area of the Prudential Regulation Authority within the bank. So my sort of day to day will be looking at the capital treatment of UK banks, the equity and debt issuances that they make, and the capital structures that make up their business. And the role is to essentially make sure that banks are adequately capitalized and the financial instruments that they are issuing are regulatorily compliant so that if the banks enter into a period of stress, they are able to absorb the losses of said stress. The work can be quite broad. It can be assessing equity and debt issuances from banks. It can be assessing how these operate within the sort of wider capital structure. It can be looking at how the equity and debt markets of UK banks are functioning. It can be looking at ongoing policy issues related to this. I might write memos for senior members of the bank. I might spend time analysing certain bank policy. I might also spend time drafting new policies and thinking about how we might want to change policy in the future. I've also spent some time working in the markets division of the Bank of England as well. I was working on the market intelligence desk where we were looking at, I won't go into the detail of it, but we're basically looking at fixed income markets and how they were operating at the time and looking at a certain policy question, as well as doing various market intelligence rounds with market intelligence. With market intelligence contacts, so institutional investors such as hedge funds, investment banks, and whatnot, understanding certain aspects of the sort of credit side, as well as FX and commodities and whatnot. So yeah, that's sort of a rough overview of the stuff that I've been doing over the last couple of years.
Thank you. And what does a typical day today look like for you? Is it quite the same or does it differ?
It can differ a reasonable amount. It could I suppose there are three sort of main things that I might be doing. Would be I might be spending some time assessing a capital instrument that a bank is issuing, whether that's debt or equity. So I will be going through all the documents and working out what it is they're trying to do and whether we're happy with all of that. And then I'll communicate that to various stakeholders within the bank and present it and present my views. And then we might then go out to the firm with questions or concerns or queries or whatever. But in the same day or same week, I might also be spending time writing memos about various other things. I might be spending time drafting policy documents or reports about what our sort of current analysis of various policies are, or where we might want to take policy in the future. Or I might also be writing market updates to inform set people in the bank about what might be going on in credit markets or whatever. So it can be reasonably varied.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you've moved across several sectors, so from crisis management and finance into public policy. What inspired this transition?
I'd love to say that it was completely deliberate, but it wasn't really. Whilst I was doing my master's at Aberdeen, I was given the opportunity to sort of work part time at a crisis management consultancy. So that was a great opportunity at the time when you're a student, you're looking for some work experience, and it was an interesting area given my sort of IR exposure whilst I was at Aberdeen doing history and politics for my undergraduate, and then international political economy for my masters. So it kind of naturally mapped at that point to do that, and it was interesting at the time. And then post masters, I was, as most of you are doing, and I'm sure you are as well, Daniel, looking at career options and saw the opening at JP Morgan and applied and got the job. And so, like most people, probably thought, right, I'd better take this. And so, yeah, I basically just took a good job opportunity that was offered to me at the time. A year down the line, I decided that the JP Morgan role wasn't for me, and so started looking sort of elsewhere at other job opportunities, and saw that the bank was hiring, and I thought the I thought the policy angle obviously aligned quite well with my sort of academic background and my personal interest background. And so again applied and got it sort of moved in that direction. So yeah, it wasn't a sort of deliberate pre-planned plan. It just sort of things just sort of fell into place and that way around.
Yeah, and what has been the most rewarding part of your experience so far with working at the Bank of England?
Um, probably probably getting to work in the markets division of the bank. It's the area of the bank that sort of directly interacts with financial markets. So when we had the LDI crisis in 2022, it was that part of the bank that then went out into the market and bought loads of gilts and um, looked to stabilize the crashing market. So it's quite an interesting place to work. I was able to run a specific sort of hedge fund analysis as part of a wider project, given my JP Morgan background. So I was given the responsibility of running some hedge fund analysis as part of this project, which allowed me to go and speak to lots of market participants and do lots of really interesting analysis. And then towards the end, as part of this project, I presented my findings and analysis to the executive director of markets at the Bank of England. So that whole experience was super interesting, really rewarding, and a privilege to be able to just to take part in that, I suppose.
How do you deal with stress, and what would be your advice to students that are facing stress?
For students, I think you should try and focus on the areas that you control, i.e., your studies, and make sure that you are just organized. And the more organized you are when you're doing your studies, and then articulate a plan early on and make sure that you're up to date and you're not stressing that you've got loads of coursework to do, you've got no time to do them. That's obviously going to be stressful. So making sure that everything is organized well and planned efficiently will reduce your stress in that respect. And then, I'm sure that plenty of graduates or soon to be graduates will be very stressed about the job market. And again, we're in a uniquely challenging, I think, environment for graduates at the moment. So there's certain areas where people can try to mitigate stress there, i.e., being just like you have to just be super proactive and probably push out of your comfort zone more than you might want to with regards to networking and stuff like that. But there will be elements of that job search which will be out with your control, i.e., what the job market is like, and being honest with yourself about what areas you can control and how best to navigate that and sort of get the best outcomes out of areas that you can directly control, and then also being honest with yourself about the areas that you can't control and trying to rationalize that and remove stress from sort of elements that you don't have direct influence over. I suppose is the best thing I can say.
No, that's some really good advice. And earlier you mentioned that after your undergraduate, you also did a master's. What initially drew you to the University of Aberdeen, and of course to do your undergraduate and master's there?
The first answer is not very interesting. The second answer is probably slightly more interesting. First answer is out of all the universities I applied to, Aberdeen was the best the best uni that I got an offer to, so I just accepted it. So that's not super interesting. In terms of my why I chose to stay in Aberdeen for my masters, I looked at a couple of other courses around Scotland, and actually the course in Aberdeen just looked the most interesting. in terms of what it was covering. And I'm actually very glad that I chose to stay in Aberdeen because I thoroughly enjoyed my masters. I thought it was really, really interesting, really academically engaging. Probably was the most enjoyment I had at uni. Actually, I think just really enjoyed the coursework. So um, yeah, thoroughly recommend that. So anybody who wants to do a masters in Aberdeen, look at international political economy. It was really good.
That's really good. And how would you say that your combination of what you studied, so your history, politics, and political economy, how would you say that that prepared you for kind of the current path that you have taken after university?
Um, I think I think my role at JP Morgan aligns pretty well. Um, Obviously, working in central banking and banking policy, macroeconomics, that kind of stuff. Um, a background in history, politics, international relations, and how capital flows operate, and how based on the basic understanding of economics is obviously super helpful, and it gives you a rounded view, and you can kind of go into a very technical field where you have to accept that you from day one won't understand a lot of things, but at least your sort of view of the world is fairly well informed. And also, if you enjoy that kind of stuff, which I presume you would have done if you've done it at uni, like I did, that kind of area of work is probably quite interesting. And so I've certainly found that. But yeah, I would say um, for my background working at the Bank of England, it probably aligns pretty well. And certainly in terms of what you're doing day to day, I writing reports, writing briefings, doing analysis, doing a bit of quantitative analysis, building that into your reports and all that sort of stuff, aligns pretty closely with the coursework that I was doing at uni as well. So in terms of skill set, um, it worked out pretty well. I know plenty of humanities students will be entering the world of work and not doing anything that they did at uni, which was kind of close to what I was like at JP Morgan, but actually moving to the Bank of England. Um, the work I do now is probably quite close to some of the stuff I was doing at uni.
Well, that's very interesting. And besides the courses you studied at university, what are your favorite memories from the University of Aberdeen, whether that be social or anything related with the city? Is there anything that has kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, social side of the city's good. Obviously, I've not been there in a few years now, but yeah, good pubs, lots of fun memories going down Belmont Street. West End of Aberdeen is also very nice. I lived there in my masters, so um, I'd suggest people to move towards the West End as they get later on in their university to career. From my experience, the rent prices in the West End were actually probably the same as the prices around the university because of various reasons. And it's a much nicer part of Aberdeen. So yeah, I'd say good experiences and good memories from amusing nights out, and then living in a nice part of Aberdeen in the West End towards the end, I'd say.
That's really interesting. And for students interested in careers in economics and public policy, what skills would you say that matter the most today?
That's a great question. I suppose they're kind of they're kind of different if depending on what sort of area you want to go down in. If you want to go pure economics, you probably if you want to be an economist or if you want to go down into pure economics, then you'll probably need a at least a master's in econ and be pretty proficient in things like econometrics and whatnot. If you're just interested generally in economics and want to go into finance, whether that's investment banking, sales and trading, asset management, whatever, you probably don't need the masters in econ. If you're doing more investment analysis and whatnot, you can kind of learn on the job. But yeah, you just have to be cognizant of the technicals and be very conscious that a lot of the recruiting cycles happen quite early on, and so you need to get your internships and stuff sorted out pretty early on if you want to go on that side of things. in terms of the public policy side of things, and at the Bank of England, what sort of areas would benefit you, or what sort of qualities would be beneficial? I think public policy is sort of accepts a broader sort of scope of people, and certainly more from the humanities, and your understanding of sort of big macro issues. And how they sort of interact within the economy is probably pretty helpful, which I suppose is where my IP experience comes in. But yeah, that's a bit of a rambling answer. But
No, no, that's fine. Thank you very much. Very interesting. And do you have any favorite books or podcasts, whether that be career or non-career related, that you would recommend to students?
yeah, probably lots actually. So in terms of podcasts, I would highly recommend students listening to lots of them. I find it a great way of assimilating lots of information at very sort of low effort. So I'd suggest every day in the morning listening to the FT morning briefing. I'd also listen to the Bloomberg morning briefing as well. They give really good sort of general news, general politics news, but also really good finance and economics news. And then I would listen to basically all of the podcasts that Bloomberg and the FT do. They're all great, and if you spend an hour a day listening to podcasts from the FT and Bloomberg, you'll be more informed than most people. So highly recommend those. In terms of books, it depends which avenue we want to go down, but book I read this year, which I thought was particularly interesting, was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It's a fairly big book, but it's very interesting. I think it's quite apt at the moment, given our sort of current political cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good, and I'm sure our students would very much benefit from the list of podcasts that you've just mentioned. Now, finally, the last question. What advice would you give to students, whether that be going applying for internships at the moment or for roles? What would be your advice to them to stand out in kind of the process?
It's mainly down to networking, I think. The volumes of applications, certainly in sort of in finance at the moment, but I suppose everywhere really in the grad ecosystem, is very, very high. And even if you have a very good CV, the likelihood of it getting sort of through the initial sift is probably quite low. So and yeah, everyone's going to have an undergraduate at a decent uni, and most people will end up having a master's at a decent uni, and everyone's going to be having a 2-1 or a first. So that doesn't differentiate you. What would differentiate you is having previous experience and having previous internships. So you need to try and network early on and get some of these experiences as early as you can to sort of build that into your CV. And then when you're applying for jobs proper, not just necessarily internships, you need to network heavily. So it's probably worth investing in LinkedIn Premium and adding hiring managers where you can and sending thoughtful messages to them to try and raise your profile. My advice would be quality over quantity on that. So if you're messaging people with regards to jobs that you've applied to, make them personalized messages that stand out, and make it a message that someone's likely to reply to. Don't just send a sort of one size fits all message to someone that's easy for them to ignore, because they will ignore them.